We're here at SLUH High today interviewing Father Tom Cummings, who started out here as a student and later came back not only as a teacher but as the president of SLUH High for a number of years. This is part of the SLUH High Archives program, our oral history component, and we're interviewing those former teachers and administrators who have had such an influence not only on the school but on so many of us who are graduates of the school. Father, we welcome you back to SLUH High and to the oral history component of the archives program. Thank you for joining us.
As I said to the alumni not too long ago, if home is where you hang your heart, this is my home.
Great. Father, you are a graduate of SLUH High. I think you first came here with your brother, your twin brother, in 1952. Could you tell us how you and your brother came to be students here at SLUH High and your original affiliation?
Well, it dates back to my older brother, who's a year ahead of both of us. And my dad and my mother never had any Catholic education. My mother's first Mass was her wedding day, and my dad, his mother was a convert. So because they had never had any Catholic education, my dad reasoned, as a pragmatist who wanted his kids to do well, that we, like him, would go into a public school. The closest public school was Southwest. Mm-hmm. So we all kind of smiled. He didn't know we already had our plans. So we kind of sneaked my older brother Dick into taking the test. He kind of got to know Father Sheehan and told the story of our lives. So I'm a twin. I have a brother 10 months older who came here. And then I have identical twin sisters 10 years younger, whose husbands went here. So they're the Duffys and the Kreckmeyers. So anyhow, we kind of coached my brother Dick, and he came and did very well. Jerry Sheehan knew there were three of us, so he gave my brother a good scholarship or good relief or whatever. And my dad kind of said, well, hell, if it's free, let's try it. He knew nothing about it at all. Dick fell in love with it. We came the next year, we fell in love with it. And to me, the incredible miracle is this man who had never had 1 minute of Catholic education was named president of the Fathers Club. And 20 years later, his most wayward son was named president of school. So I kind of thought, I'm not in charge of any of this. You know?
So Father, before we go any further, I just want to make an adjustment since we're at the beginning of this, and I want to get a little closer to me. So let's slide your chair. And if you can sit as far right from the chair as you can. There we go. Jim, would you get that water bottle there and pour the rest of it into the glass for Father?
Which glass?
Right here.
Filmed already? Is that still good?
It's good.
Okay. We're just seeing every now and then we get a little hit from this.
Want some more than that?
I think we're okay.
You tell me when I can get anything. Father, getting back to your early affiliation with St. High, so you came here in 1952, you and your twin brother.
Yeah.
And you spent 4 years here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go directly into the Jesuits from graduation after high school here?
I did, and that was a custom. There were 14 in my class who went into the Jesuits. I didn't even know that. I didn't care. I didn't want it to be a group experience. So I was at St. Stanislaus in Florissant, and then I did my regency, which is the 3-year teaching period. Mm-hmm. At Rockhurst, and Rockhurst was just opening up the new school. So it was really kind of exciting. And to this day, I correspond with a lot of those kids I taught at Rockhurst.
That was your first teaching assignment.
That's right.
You were in, like you say, the regency portion of your Jesuit education.
It's kind of open-ended, so the provincial would just choose where you go according to the need. And I fell in love with it as I did this school and went to 4 years at St. Mary's and came back. I'm trying to see it logically. The easiest way to explain it, I was here 77 to 85 as president. In the second half of 85, I was named president of Rockhurst. and I was there from 85 to 93. Then I returned here as superior of the community. That's why Paul says, not Paul, but Dave.
Dave Laughlin?
Yeah. Gave me a trophy for 4 returns, and I returned one time after that. So I've got 5 major returns.
So you taught as a Jesuit after your ordination at other schools before coming here as president in 77?
Yes.
And Father, when you came here in 77, first of all, did you think there were a lot of changes? I know you had a vision because the Triple E campaign quickly evolved.
Sure.
But what was the difference in terms of your experience back in the 50s with the school and now in the 1970s, 20 some odd years later?
Totally different.
Totally
I mean, it still has the essential spirit, but it was a very dangerous neighborhood, and the board was seriously considering moving out to West County. When I was named president, it just came from a phone call from Jerry Sheehan, who, by the way, is the longest-serving principal here. He was assistant in Rome, and he said, we need someone to really change the school because it's getting a bad reputation for being in a very dangerous part of the city. So my first instinct, it's part of the Triple E, but my first instinct was to make it not dangerous for the kids. I mean, several of them had been shot at. Wow. It was really serious. So we circumscribed the whole place with a fence. And the stadium was a good excuse because we needed a stadium to lock in the whole periphery so that the kids would be safe. You'd be amazed how that started increasing the number of kids who came here.
Oh, really?
Because the parents knew that we knew. We bought 5 houses in the neighborhood, one of which we lived in, as a sign we weren't afraid. And it just began to change. It was wonderful. The change was breathtaking and happened pretty quickly once people knew they weren't in danger.
You want to have them do a lead-in on that story, just of the time frame, just because we didn't hear that.
Well, they want you to go back, if you could, the lead-in, you said you got here in 1977, and you immediately realized that the school needed some dramatic change. So what you, just to kind of recap or go over, you saw and knew from what others were reporting to you that safety was a big issue, and I guess what you began was an enhancement of the campus, really a big enhancement of the campus.
Sure. And that was part of the Triple E program.
Right, right.
So Triple E is enrichment, endowment, expansion. That's part of the enrichment phase.
Yes.
And we went through the whole school and redid the chapel dramatically. You know, we carpeted and...
I remember coming back and seeing this was not the chapel, but yeah, it was dramatically improved.
But it was a return to the original. They had, in kind of the secular reaction with Vatican II, they had gotten rid of all the statues and all the religious goods except a big crucifix.
Yes.
Which some student, I forget who it is, but so we kind of regained the statues, brought the altar way closer into the community, and even that was a big change.
And you say as that program reached fulfillment, it helped enrollment. I mean,
oh, very much so. Yeah.
I mean, the reputation, not that the school had gone downhill, but that the neighborhood had, and that was affecting parents' decisions as to whether they would
Sure,
send their sons
it was
here.
pretty dramatic. It was almost frightening.
Did that also entail, you mentioned as we came here to the Nation Conference Room for this filming, some of the changes that you made physically to the building? Because this part of St. Lucia High was always a Jesuit residence.
That's right. My room was right there.
Okay. Well, as I recall, and you probably the same way when you were a student here, I mean, this was off limits at that time to any of the students.
It was formerly cloistered.
Oh, that was, I didn't know it was formerly.
So that, pardon me for interrupting, Bob, but those stairs down
Yes.
with the door,
Yes.
that door started cloister.
Oh.
So no teacher, no kid ever came through that
Even the
cloister.
teachers, because it was cloistered. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that the teachers even weren't allowed. Records in terms of, I know CBC, they didn't have some of the, maybe the neighborhood problems, but they had issues and they wound up having to move to West County. And they
Yeah.
were saying that the board was, if not on the verge, seriously thinking of possibly closing the Oakland campus and moving elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so when you came as president in '77, again, recognizing this neighborhood problem, you began the EEE program, and you were explaining to us how it was enrichment, enhancement, and expansion.
No, enrichment, endowment, expansion.
I'm sorry, we increase the endowment.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask is, not only was the new football stadium built, and you mentioned that everything was fenced in for security, when was it that some of this area that had been the Jesuit cloister was changed over and made into offices? You mentioned that your office was up here for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that background?
That was very gradual and very painful because well, the older Jesuits didn't want to move out of their rooms.
Yes.
So the first thing I did is take the first floor, divide it up. If you faced it, on the right side were offices. On the left side were really kind of counseling rooms, guest rooms, etc.
Right.
And so I was the one who first took over the first floor. Second floor, I did a bit. And then I think it was Paul Sheridan or someone, completed the.
Yeah, followed in your lead.
So by that time, the Jesuits were used to it because their numbers were so declining. Yeah.
Well, obviously St. LSU High has not only stayed here but thrived. I think the enrollment continues to be well endowed. So we have you and others to thank for that.
Sure.
That move, because otherwise St. LSU High might well have wound up in far West County as so many of the other schools have.
Well, and as I told the board, you could never get the resources that you have here if you moved to West County. So at the time they were building the big building next door to us.
The Science Museum.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they connected that with the planetarium, which existed in Forest Park.
Yeah.
Across the highway.
So you get the planetarium, you get the building next door, you get the zoo, you get the botanical gardens. You couldn't have any of that.
And the school has also had some affiliation, I think, with the junior college. Isn't that where the swimming program, I think, haven't they used the facilities there at times?
Yeah, there's so many stories to tell.
Yeah.
I traded off our field so they could play soccer on certain dates if we could use their swimming pool, and that exists to the day. And there's some honors classes that go down there. But that's what I mean by the resources in the city.
Yes.
And I told the board if they moved, I quit.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't going to do that.
And then with the success of the EEE program, and it solidified things so that they didn't want to push that after.
That's right.
I see.
And enrichment, endowment, expansion, EEE, there's a big plaque down below. Some of the alumni were very angry, I think I told you that, because they thought I was saying that they weren't supporting enough.
I see.
And they had never had a capital campaign.
This was the first, the EEE was the
first capital campaign
for St. LSU High.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And then it started, now they get $1 million when they blink an eye.
Well, again, it's a lot of thanks to you and those who worked with you that saved the city location,
Yeah.
being a city resident. I'm glad it's still, and as you say, it ties in with so many resources in this area that the school has affiliation or some kind of relationship with.
Yeah.
Father, after you left here, you went to Rockhurst High School?
Well, let me go back just a minute. Then I went back to Rockhurst. I was named president that October of Rockhurst.
After leaving here.
After leaving here.
You were here 8 years, weren't you?
Yeah.
Normally, isn't that a 6-year term?
It is.
And they extended you for 2 years.
And then I said, it's time to go. I didn't want to stay too long. I think with lead administrators, that's really dangerous. So I kept bugging the provincial, and then the provincials changed.
Oh.
in that change, Dave Fleming, who's a graduate of St. Louis
Yes, I
High,
remember Father Fleming.
had told Bob Costello, who's a graduate of St. Louis High, I talked to Father Tom, and someday he'd enjoy being president of Rockhurst. Well, someday was a few weeks later. I just couldn't believe it.
It was really quick.
Bob, getting back, many people thought I was too young to be president here because I was 38 years old. The next president was 63. So they saw me as the kid who's trying too much. But I think I certainly won the students' hearts. And I have a philosophy. Good leaders, like good lovers, don't command, they invite. And I invite you to be your best and do your best for the greater glory of God. And that's the vision I brought to the kids. And
Well, I served on the alumni board when you were president, and I remember that coming across very strong and very effectively.
Yeah.
And as I told you coming here for the interview, my wife fondly remembers many of the social events that we attended with you, and she always said that you were not only a great priest, but a great dancer.
Yeah.
And that left me in the lurch because I'm not.
Yeah. My whole family dances.
Well, that's great.
So if it's a big celebration, and the one I danced with, because I was a little worried if people saw me with all these good-looking mothers. So my major partner was my sister-in-law, my brother Dick's wife.
Who is your twin brother?
No.
Dick is a year older, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
So you and your twin brother, though, went after Dick. Dick led the way. I mean, he was a year ahead of you.
That's right. That's right.
Father, we're going to resume. Go ahead. Did you
Okay.
have something?
Well, I was going to say, let's stay with the Triple E for a minute.
Yes, please.
Enrichment was an attempt to ask what can enrich these kids' lives. So we got classes that were much smaller in number because teachers were trying to teach 35 kids. So we reduced that number, part of which was what they call an RIF, a reduction in force. And that began to make a big difference. Then we took out all the lockers. That doesn't sound like a big thing. But with 1,000 lockers, the old ones clanged.
I remember that.
And so we got, and you probably remember this, we got what they call Mondrian super quiet lockers. And they thudded shut. They didn't go,
Well, I remember the clanging in the 60s when I was here.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That was an improvement.
yeah. And they're still here and doing well. I'm amazed. But they're called Mondrian because he's a French painter. And he painted in blocks of color. So when they first put in, and I always regretted this, when they first put in the lockers, they did it like Mondrian would do a painting. So you'd have purple, yellow, green.
Colors all over.
Yeah. But it was too hard. And Ray Manker, you probably remember
Yes.
Ray, was a very good friend of mine. He said, Father, I can't keep up with the colors. So they finally just glossed them over in one color.
One color now, yes.
Yeah, but they're still very effective. Then we bought 1,000 new desks, and we just kind of renovated the classrooms. But I think it was Bob Costello who had the doors inserted, and that really helped.
Well, I remember coming back because they were always
Yeah,
perpendicular, flat with
sure,
the hallway. And
yeah.
I thought that was an interesting thing with the recess that you're pointing out.
Yeah. So we did a lot of changes, and then, of course, the chapel was a huge change. And then the stadium, then moving over to Lawn Place. So there was a lot going on. And I enjoyed it. You mentioned Emmett Hannock. We were very dear friends. And Paul Martell, I wasn't as close to Paul. I mean, I love him dearly, but Emmett and I were real good friends.
Father, you left here, you went to Rockhurst and had the same position as president there.
That's right.
How do you compare Rockhurst, your experience at Rockhurst with St. Louis High? I mean, I know they're both Jesuit high schools and that, but is there much difference culturally being on the two sides of the state, different sides of the state?
Totally.
Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
When you go to Kansas City, you're moving west.
Yes.
And there's a western feel to it. It's a younger city. It has engaging architecture, French architecture. It has the big plaza in the middle of the and the kids were immediately much more friendly,
More friendly.
but also wilder.
Oh.
And the wildness didn't bother me at all. I taught advanced placement English and enjoyed them thoroughly. That doesn't mean they were better than St. Louis U High. St. Louis U High has this incredible academic history, but it's tough to break into at first when you're a teacher, where Rockhurst was just, you know, and they say our other big school is Regis High School. They say as you move west, the kids get more and more kind of open and free. And
So there definitely is a cultural difference.
oh, my dad said when you go to Columbia, that's the division between East and West.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were president at Rockhurst for a number of years.
For 8 years.
8 years, just like here, 8 years. You originally came back here as superior of the, not originally, but eventually came back here as superior of the Jesuit community.
I did.
When was that?
That was right after I left Rockhurst.
So
that would have.
Rockhurst 8 years, and then you came back to St. Louis U High as a superior of the Jesuit community.
Yes. And that probably would be 93.
In those 8 years, I mean, a lot had begun back in your tenure in the 70s into the 80s with the AAA. Did you notice much change in the school or the environment when you came back in the 90s, or was it?
It's what I wanted.
It's what you wanted?
I could see it materialize. The kids were more open. They had a green space.
Yes.
Which, that was a parking lot.
I remember way back, you organized a party to move trees. There were a lot of trees that you had to be transplanted.
Well,
Did
we
you
had.
supervise that?
Well, we had to get rid of the old trees.
Yes.
They were old pines that were just falling apart. So we, with kids, dug up those trees.
I remember that.
And then Joe Bannister, who's my classmate,
Yes, I remember Joe.
he was in construction, and my dad thought we were crazy, dug up the trees that were on the, what side is this on the
North side?
I'm trying to think.
I mean,
Yeah.
Oakland would be the north side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the trees were planted along there, I remember the trees.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we transplanted the trees from that line, the old
Right.
football field or whatever. And we hand transplanted them. My dad thought we were crazy. And we went up them and got them stripped down as much as we could. And then we ran a hose all the way. Ray Manker did this. Or no, Brother Witz did it. And had it watered every day. And every tree, 13-year-old transplants, every tree has lived.
That's a remarkable story because oftentimes with transplants, especially trees of that maturity, don't handle it. And
13, they were 13 years old, yeah. And if you look, to prove it, we were in such a rush to get them into the ground. If you look at the ground, it's all uneven because we just plugged them in and went forward. But those are still the same trees.
Well, they add to the campus and provide a nice line of vision going west. Father, what about the Jesuit community? I guess by the time you came back as superior, it has shrunken, had it?
Oh, when I was a boy here, there were 46 Jesuits.
At St. Louis U High?
At St. Louis U High.
Priests, brothers, and scholastics?
Yeah. Yeah, there were 14 scholastics. That's unheard of today.
Yes.
And, they were great fun, but you could still feel a subtle change of the lay people, that they were suddenly given big, important jobs, and they were part of the whole development. So I saw that, and that's why I became so close to so many teachers. And what's the next thing I was going to say? Anyhow.
Father, were you here when, I guess it was Paul Owens became the first lay principal? I mean, that was a big change because it was the first non-Jesuit to be in a
that's right.
leadership role at that level.
And originally as a board, we had voted in a Jesuit, but he was from another province, and his provincial decided he couldn't come.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So we said, let's think of a layman. And one of the laymen that we wanted was a classmate of mine, and ended up being president or principal at Clayton.
Oh.
But it was Paul Owens, and then after Paul Owens, it was Leo Dressel, I think.
I forget the sequence, but
Yeah.
I mean, Leo Dressel was a Jesuit,
Oh, yeah.
and then at one point they went to Mary Schinkenberg, was it, the First Lady
Yeah.
principal here? That was a little bit later, I think.
I was in on both of those, and
Sure.
they were huge moves to get a lay principal.
Right.
I thought half the alumni were going to leave us, and then to get a woman principal.
So you were part of that?
Oh yeah, very
Okay.
much so.
Well,
She
I
was a
wanted
good
to-
friend of mine, and she's as good a dancer as I am. We had a great time at the faculty parties.
Oh, that's great. Well, how difficult was it to convince the powers that be to go with not only another lay person, but the first woman principal here at St. Lucie High?
They had a professional staff, and I can remember Leo Dressel talking about it. And he said after they interviewed people, she was the obvious first choice.
Mm-hmm.
So they just went ahead with it and announced why,
Mm-hmm.
what she had done and so
Mhm.
forth. She had been, I think, principal at Nearing's,
Mm-hmm.
and was much beloved, and we went with it. And I think it really changed the school in terms of respecting women. That the person now in charge was a woman,
Yes.
and she was very sweet, but she didn't back away from any decision. I really liked her. And then she retired.
And was she accepted by the other members of the faculty, I mean, being brought in, or was there a period of adjustment? Do you recall? I mean,
There was a period of adjustment
but
because
quickly, I'm sure, won over by
yeah,
those
yeah,
doubters who didn't know whether a woman would be able to
yeah,
handle the job here.
yeah.
And you say you think that helped change some of the culture. I mean, not that it was an anti-feminine, but it helped soften or make the boys more appreciative.
Very much so. And they also saw her strength.
Yes.
But they were real cute. Sometimes going down steps, they'd reach out their hands to help her. She was a lot healthier than they were. Yes, that worked out well. And then we went back to a male lay principal.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about, and jumping back to the Triple E, and you mentioned that St. Lucie High bought several properties along Lawn. But I remember talking with you back then with the expansion that you commented at one of our alumni board meetings that St. Lucie High wanted to remain a good neighbor and not destroy
That's right.
the neighborhood. And I remember I was very impressed with that consciousness on your part and effort to be a good neighbor, not just the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah.
Because you could have torn down dozens of buildings. And
We have such powerful alumni, we could have done anything,
I
really.
understand. Could you talk a little bit about that and what not forced you, but made you say we're going to be good neighbors? And the expansion was basically to the west and south, where there were relatively few residents.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the toughest roles I played. So I
Can
interviewed.
you tell us what that is? Because we don't, as a viewer on the video, we don't know what we're talking about.
Okay.
We're talking about the Triple E expansion and the acquisition of additional properties, but Father Cummings and the board were careful not to buy and knock down private residences. They were very conscious of trying to expand the campus, but without the destruction of the surrounding neighborhood, other than to the west and somewhat to the south, which was more commercial and industrial than residential.
That's right. And I call it replacement.
Mm-hmm.
We would actually find a better house within the neighborhood, not just this tight neighborhood, but close by,
Right.
and offer the people a better house. And most of them took it eagerly.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't remember any time that we took down a house, without moving the people into a
They
new
weren't
house.
displaced and left.
That's
the
right.
land on their
That's
own.
right.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I knew you were very conscious of that.
And that whole expansion, and this is due to Paul Sheridan, basically, but I think it was ultimately 27 houses.
That were purchased by the high school.
So that's the whole new campus you see.
Yes.
Yeah. So those were houses that were reclaimed, and I'm just kind of laughing when I talk about it so easily, but those were hard times.
I'm sure, just like you were mentioning about the Jesuits being moved out of their rooms here in the cloister wing,
Yeah.
as you wanted to expand or make changes for additional space for classrooms and offices.
Well, and one of them I got very close to, Father Hagen,
Oh yes, Marty Hagan.
walked up to me at a breakfast once, because this was his home forever.
Yes.
And he said, "Where the hell are you moving next?" And I knew he liked me. I said, "Oh, I think I might stop at the Arch." So he supported me through that.
Father, what do you think? I mean, you're obviously long in the Jesuit order, but so many of us who have been graduates of here feel that there's a special spirit about St. SLUH High, and obviously that's part of the Ignatian philosophy, and now Father Arupe is a man for others that
Sure.
kind of embodies everything. I wonder if you could talk about how that is inculcated in the students and what you've experienced over the years, the many times you've been affiliated with the school, starting out as a student back in the 50s, but then, as we've been talking, your years as president and then later as superior.
Yeah. Well, I will frame it with a summary from one of our mothers who lost her husband in a car crash, and her son was very sick with leukemia or something. And she would come here every day to help out. And I finally said to her, "Mary, why the hell, how do you have time to do all this?" She said, "Every time I walk in that door, it gives me a calm sense of purpose." And that really hit me, because that's what I was trying to inculcate. And she sensed that this is a holy place. And when you walk in, you feel it. And most people talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, they talk about the tough #1 SLUH students and all that. I didn't find that at all. I found them to be very warm. As I mentioned when I was talking about Kansas City, it's easier to get into a Kansas City crowd,
Mm-hmm.
but tougher to get into a St. Louis crowd. But that's true of the whole city. My sister-in-law has been here 40 years, and she was born in Memphis, and they still ask her what high school she went to.
Which is a famous St. Louis tradition,
sure.
asking people where you went
Sure.
to high school. As
And of course, the arrogant answer of SLUH was, "We went to the high school." But actually, that's not arrogant. What they were saying when that developed, we went to the high school of the university. So it
Well,
was.
for years, actually, St. SLUH High was a department of the university, wasn't it, as it evolved?
Sure.
I mean, from the early years, it started out as an academy, and then the university was, but it was part of the university for many years until it moved here to Oakland Avenue.
Yeah, well, no, and I wasn't part of this at all, but they say the first founding was downtown.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where.
I think underneath the arch from the research that was done.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
But later, as both the high school and the college, St. SLUH evolved, I think for years, wasn't it, it was part of the department within the university for many years, and then when the backers funded the building here on Oakland Avenue, it became totally independent over the
Yeah.
years.
But you know what's interesting? In all of our Jesuit universities, the high school came first.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm living down at the university, I like to remind them of that. The high school came first. Because in those days, the high school was called a college.
Yes.
And that's why CBC, Christian Brother College, held on to its name.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, the high schools throughout the country are the foundation of the university.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting point.
And now that I'm living at the university, I love to remind them of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I just couldn't, I wanted to say hi, Father, I just wanted to come down and say hi. I'm not gonna, I know we're on the clock with these guys, but I just.
Well, it's good to see you, Joe.
Father,
Yeah.
great to come down, you're looking great.
Thank you. I miss the place.
Yeah, well, come down more often then.
I can't drive.
I'll come get you some time for lunch.
Okay. All right. We'll try that.
We'll wrap up. We've been going on for not quite 45 minutes, but in terms of your long affiliation, that the school now, the campus has been so enhanced and is really amazing place to visit.
Yeah.
Thanks to you and the others. I mean, when we were here, you and I both way back in the 50s and 60s, I mean, the campus was much smaller. Not exactly dingy, but it didn't have the luster that it
Yeah.
does now, thanks to the...
Well, and the only parking lot was the one.
On the alley.
On the alley, yeah.
It's very, very limited
Yeah,
there. And I'm sure that probably caused some, I mean, with kids parking all over the place, causes some neighbors to be upset in terms of not having...
But see, in our time, there weren't many kids who had a car.
Well, that's true. That's very true. It was mainly bus and even streetcars.
Oh, that's one other quick story, and then I'll...
Please.
The other thing I decided in the Triple E program, endowment's obvious,
Yes.
expansion's obvious,
Yes.
but we had an old rickety school bus, and every time we had a football game, every time we had a practice, we had to take that bus somewhere to borrow a field to practice on.
Oh.
And of course, a lot of it was Forest Park.
Yes.
That sounds easy, but you had to go out to Kings Highway and all the way around. And I was really afraid for the kids' safety. So I went out and got what they call a Wayne lifeguard system, W-A-Y-N-E. It's considered the safest school bus there is because it's ribbed all the way around. So if it should tumble or fall, it doesn't collapse. So we didn't have the money, and we took a real risk, and we were so proud of our SLUH Blue Wayne lifeguard system. I think it might still be here. I don't know.
I don't know, but I remember the old bus that you refer to, and then the new one that was quite an enhancement.
Oh, yeah. And we painted it a SLUH Blue.
I remember that, yeah.
And we had a slogan, SLUH, Spirit Lifts Us Higher.
Spirit lifts us higher.
So everyone thought we were a Baptist college as we went.
Well, Father, thank you so much for taking the time to come visit with us, and thank you for your long service to not only the Jesuits, but to the St. Louis High community, which you're well-known, well-liked, and beloved by so many. So
Thank you.
Thank you for this time.
And this year is my 60th year as a Jesuit.
60th year since joining the Jesuits?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Okay.